Welcome to the November meeting of the North End Neighbourhood Council. Thank you for all of those people in the room who braved the weather, which didn't cooperate with us tonight. First items of business, let's get into the liaison reports. I don't see the police. So Josh from the fire department, we've got your presentation up here.
Well, hello and good evening, everybody. My name is Josh Slasner. I'm the Assistant Chief of EMS for Tacoma Fire Department. And I know what you guys are thinking. You're looking right here. I forgot to put it in my PowerPoint slide, but yes, this is a mustache. Because it's no showing November, as we all know, right? And it's raise awareness for men's health. It's something I participate every year. My wife absolutely hates it, but she deals with it because she knows it's a good cause. In fact, just so everybody's aware, Tacoma Fire, it's actually something that we started a couple of years ago, and it's very kind of near to our hearts. We lost one of our guys to cancer, and so we called Bo Denver, because his name was Bo Schemer, and he died a few years ago from a result of cancer. And so for you men out there, this is for you and for me, just make sure that we're doing our annual checkups and keeping us safe. It's incredibly important. So that's kind of why I mentioned it, even though I forgot it in the slide. So, we did get to participate in proctor treats, and we did get to set up the chute despite the construction that's going on at Station 13 right now, so that's pretty exciting. So I figured I'd head that off with just a picture there. There we go. All right. And of course, we always kind of do a little bit of call volume, so we're down actually 7% for the North End, so that's excellent. I like seeing that. That means there's less medical calls, that means there's less fire calls. In fact, there was no major fires in the North End during the month of October, so that's always good news as well. You can see there's 7 fires, but those are usually minor fires. I'll always try to point out the big major fires if there is some. We got some good news. As I mentioned, kind of there was some construction in Station 13. I mentioned that back in September to you guys, that it's been kind of shut down for a little bit. They were redoing some plumbing. They were redoing the apparatus bay floor itself. It was starting to show signs of stress and weakness to where there was tension in the ladder that is stored in there in 213 and ladder 3, but potentially could have collapsed through the floor. Never a good thing. Hard to respond that way. So they rebuilt that, got that valve structured up and supported. As well as poured the cement out there in front of the apparatus bay as well. So I'm proud to announce that they should be in on the 5th, so later this week. So that's exciting news. It'll come back from their temporary locations and be back housed protecting the North End. Somebody asked about the salmon. I didn't know that they had removed it. I haven't been by there. I hope that it comes back. It's better. I'll try to find out. I'll ask around this week, so I'll send Peter an email. I mentioned in September as well, that we had CPR, it used to be Sunday, the CPR weekend coming up. So I'm proud to announce that we had 889 community members trained for CPR, first aid, how to respond to even opioid crisis. And so some pretty awesome stuff. And if you guys missed that opportunity because you were unavailable, there's more opportunities. If you go to tacoma.gov/CPR, it'll take you to a website, and there's 2 free offerings I already kind of mentioned on there. One of them being December 4th and December 20th. So mark your calendar. Like I said, go to tacoma.gov/CPR, and you guys can get signed up for those free classes. A lot of times they're held at Station 8, sometimes over at Station 16, which is in the North End as well. So just look for a location that's near you. And then for this month, I want to talk about cooking safety because we have Thanksgiving coming around the corner. We all love to eat, and we all love to cook, at least so let's be safe out there. I will say the leading cause of kitchen fires, as you guys can kind of see on the slide, is unattended cooking. No surprise there. People forget to set timers, whatever it may be. There's 3 times more cooking fires during Thanksgiving time as well. Not the ultimate day that we have fires, that would be 4th of July. But cooking fires specifically, Thanksgiving Day. And then I'm going to throw out the deep frying a turkey, because we see this every year, no joke. Despite all the warnings and everything that goes out, that turkey, that frozen turkey, no, don't throw a frozen turkey in a deep fryer. Make sure it's thawed, make sure it's dried out before that turkey goes in a deep fryer, otherwise you will set your porch on fire. Make sure that deep fryer is outside, not inside. So, and then please keep an extinguisher nearby. And then that last little picture, if it's hard for you guys to see, it says cooking and kids. My 22 years, I've I've seen a handful of kids with severe burns on Thanksgiving, and it's because of kitchen safety. So make sure you maintain a distance, keep kids at bay, if you will. They say at least 3 feet when you're cooking. Right, got something hot on the stove, you're moving it to the sink, something of that nature. It's easy to trip over these kids, animals, rugs, whatever it may be, and then that hot whatever gets put down on those kids or potentially animals or whatever it may be. So try to keep that cooking safe in those distances. We want to see you guys safe this Thanksgiving and be happy and full. So, all right. And there's the candy chute that we were able to get up last minute for the trick-or-treaters this year. Pretty exciting. So, especially with all the rain we had. So, what do we have for questions? I see one in the back.
I just have a question. So, in the kitchen, if you have grease and you have electrical devices, what type of fire extinguisher?
Definitely not water. They're called a dry chem extinguisher, usually what they call a 2A 10 BC fire extinguisher. You can pick them up typically at any Home Depot. I shouldn't mention like a brand name, but most of your stores you can pick up a 2A 10 BC is what you're mainly looking for. So yeah, dry chemical extinguisher, best extinguisher to have. Question?
Not really related, but sort of related. What do we do with our fire extinguishers when they're empty? Because we drive ours around looking for places to put it. I mean, like we take it to the dump, to the hazardous waste, but they're closed when we do.
Yeah, that was gonna be my recommendation, was gonna be the dump. Here's something for you too, if you have an extinguisher, this is just extinguishers in general, I'm gonna throw this out there, because a lot of people don't know this. Every year, you should take your extinguisher, kick it upside down with a rubber mallet, and kind of tap it on the back, because what happens over time, and I know there's expirations on extinguishers as well. That being said, even without that expiration kind of being set, if you want to get the full use out of an extinguisher at the time that you actually need it, because I mean, not everybody uses it, kick that thing upside down, pat it on with a rubber mallet, get that caking that's going on in the bottom of that extinguisher, and get it back into circulation with the rest of the propellant that actually get the extinguisher itself. Great question. Dump would be my best answer. I wish I had more for you.
I'm happy the city's maintained the Fire Engine 13 house because it's on the landmarks list.
Historical Society.
Yes, yeah, and but I also know that it's kind of outdated. It's not really meeting the needs of the fire department. So what's the plan for the new firehouse? Is there a plan?
Yeah. I appreciate the heads up on this question.
I thought it was going to be at Proctor and 21st, but I'm hearing that may not be.
Yeah, and so just, you know, he kind of alerted me to this question before I got here, so I did as much digging as I can. In fact, we have a planning specialist that I work upstairs with at headquarters, and I asked him kind of like, and he says, yeah, you know, I kind of remember them saying something about that a while ago, and he said, you know, just realize that the fire department doesn't actually own those stations. Public Works does. Lease them, and so it has to kind of be on Public Works. So the chief was out of office today, so I wasn't able to ask her if she had any additional, but I'll follow up with her just to see if she has anything else.
Okay.
I wish I had more answers for the dog. Police in the back.
The fire extinguishers for a second. I actually got flagged down the other day by a lady who had an expired fire extinguisher, and she wanted to practice with it because she's like, I've never needed to use one, and I don't really know like how to use it, but it was expired, and she asked me where she could do that, and I was like, fire department, I have no idea. She didn't know if she could like go outside in her backyard and like use it, or in a trap. Like, do you have a recommendation just in case I ever get that question again?
Yeah, I mean, backyard's probably safe, but that being said, I know we have what's called a CERT team, which is a Civilian Emergency Response Team, and it's open to the public, anybody can volunteer for it, so when there's a major disaster or something like that, we rely on the community to kind of aid the fire department, the police department, and everything that we do, and they actually do extinguisher training. I wonder if we could even donate possibly old extinguishers to them, or them out for a day, so that's something I can connect with emergency management of the city and see if that's a possibility, and then get that back. Question?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Round of applause for John.
black and white activist delegation up here? You can actually walk as long as you don't go public places.
Oh,
You know how I go?
around?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know what to do with that. I'm gonna leave the fire department's, PowerPoint up.
Smiling, all this, yeah. We'll do the same.
I feel like now I'm gonna have to come to these meetings with a PowerPoint.
I recommended we park our patrol car in here next time, right? We'll make that work somehow.
Of course you will, of course you will. The fire department always shows us up. We go to these community events, and we're so excited to be there. Like, we've got our cop cars out there and these red and blue lights, and all the kids are so excited. And the fire department shows up, usually late, because they're fashionably late, because they show up in this big red fire engine. And then the kids want nothing to do with us anymore. They're like, oh, you have stickers? That's cool. They have hats. They're like, oh, we can turn your lights on? That's cool. They'll pull their hose out and let us shoot water. That happened. Yeah.
We're gonna give the kids tasers next time. Like, how fun.
There you go. I think there's some volunteers from the fire department that might want to get tased.
Pepper spray, here you go, kid. Have fun.
It is true. I mean, you guys laugh, but it's true. So we're just gonna start rolling around with the Bearcat and the bear, the SWAT rigs, full time, because it's the only thing that maybe comes close to the fire truck. I'm just jealous. Maybe I should have been a firefighter. Good evening. Good to see you guys. Small group tonight. Where's everybody?
This is a good group. The weather.
Okay, for the weather. All right, I'll take it. At least the World Series is over. I feel like that might have impacted attendance. It might have impacted attendance for me. But I'm here because it's over. So, anyways, we just have a few quick updates for you guys, and then we'll field any questions that you guys might have. Nothing crazy going on right now. We're coming into the holiday season, obviously. And so Phil's got some good tips for you. I'll let him talk here in a second. We participated in proctor treats as well. Not with a candy shoot.
We didn't make it on their PowerPoint.
We did
clearly,
not.
So.
We did not make it on their PowerPoint. I think Phil went as a firefighter.
Yeah, yep, that was the one. Nope.
Yeah. So Halloween's over, obviously coming into the Thanksgiving and the Christmas holidays, so it's going to be, busy with just people out and about shopping, and it always gets busy this time of the year. So just a couple of quick things to note. I know we changed the clocks back a couple of days ago, and the weather has, I think, turned for the rest of the winter until, I don't know, hopefully May or June or whatever, when the rain decides to end. But we are continuing our street racing emphasis all over the city, the north and the south end. Phil actually worked it this past weekend. Surprisingly, there are still street racers out and about, which hopefully it'll start to see a drop off in that because of the weather. And so, of course, there's that going on. And then we have a ton of community events coming up. We're participating in some turkey giveaways this year, just like we did last year, which I think they were overwhelmingly popular last year. It was amazing the turnout that we had and the number of turkeys and Thanksgiving fixings that we were able to give out to the community in need. So that was amazing. We're ramping up to do that again. And then, like I said, of course, the holiday season is upon us. So I'll turn the mic over to Phil. He can give you some tips and tricks to stay safe this holiday, and then we can answer any questions that you guys might have. So
A lot of power in this microphone.
you can walk.
Walk.
No, over the table.
I don't do anymore. I'm nervous. Hey everyone, I'm Phil. So tips. We'll do a little segment, huh? Fire department can do this. Tips with Phil. Yeah? Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. PowerPoint presentations and be you smiling with the kids. There you go. Yeah. So we'll do some tips. Obviously, it's raining. Roads are wet. It's dark outside, so let's slow it down. There's been a lot of collisions lately.
Especially today.
Especially
a ton
today.
today.
Like even driving here, I had to avoid like 6 collisions on the way on like Pack Ave and all the way down near Roy. So it was like, can't be late for this meeting. Everyone's okay. There's cops there, fire department's there, of course. Everyone was okay. But it's gonna get cold, right? In the mornings, we're gonna see a lot of upticks in motor vehicle thefts, right? People like to start their cars, go inside, come back, and boom, your car is gone. So if you have the auto start feature, great, you can use it. However, lock your cars. If you have an older car that doesn't have the auto start feature, I just recommend bringing a blanket and sitting in your car for the next couple of minutes for it to warm up, because it's gonna happen. It's inevitable. People that don't expect it at all come back to their cars with their cup of coffee and the car is gone. And then we're showing up in our nice warm car and taking the report for you, which is really unfortunate because all you want to do is go to work, run your errands in a nice warm car. So just be mindful of that. And then shopping season's right around the corner, right? Going to the mall, going to the stores, buying a whole bunch of stuff. We usually walk around with a lot of bags. They drop them off in their car and they go back in the store. A lot of people that are vagrants, they look out for this type of activity and they will find your car and they will pilfer it and they'll take all your stuff and no more Christmas presents. So what I recommend and what we've seen that helps a little bit is go to your car, drop off your stuff in it, and then just drive around the parking lot for maybe make a lap, and then repark somewhere else, right? Because then it looks like your car just showed up. They don't know that there's Xboxes and PlayStations in the back. That's always a small little tip that works. Maybe carry a blanket, keep it in the back seat if you do for whatever reason or in a rush. Have something in your car, throw it over it. It's not a guaranteed fix, but it's something, right? Rather than having an Apple box or TV box right in the middle of your car. That's all I have. Just obviously just be mindful if you're being followed to your car, be aware of it. You can always call us. Anything suspicious. I think even like Costco or something like that has programs where you can ask a staff member if you don't feel comfortable just to walk you out to your car. I've heard that a few times. But other than that, I mean, just be smart, be cognizant, be aware. That's all we ask.
Call us if you need us.
Questions?
So update on staffing, Pierce County complained about you stealing all their sheriffs, but they said that you maxed out on the stealing, so are you there?
We have a little bit more room for stealing, just a few.
To be fair, we didn't steal the sheriff. We left him in Pierce County. We did take 17 of their deputies though. Yeah. So I think we talked about it a little bit last meeting, but Chief Jackson decided to go forward with a hiring incentive for in-county laterals. Not just Pierce County laterals, but any agency within Pierce County, simply because it's an easy transition, right? There are already police officers in Washington, there are already police officers in Pierce County, and they just get to kind of come over to Tacoma and then learn about the city's rules and regulations and ordinances and codes and things like that, but they pretty much hit the ground running. And so it's literally a fraction of time between when they get hired and they start, when they get hired, go through their training, and then start counting as a body and operating a patrol car by themselves. So it was a very successful program. We did get 17 laterals from Pierce County. We onboarded half of them last month, or maybe the end of the month before. And I believe the other ones are all in the process of being onboarded now within the next couple of weeks. We always have to do it on a pay cycle, so however that looks here. But yeah, so they come in, they have like a month of training, getting, trained at the range, our taser program, all the things that we do. And then they ride in a patrol car with a training officer for, I believe it's only a month, provided there's no hiccups or they don't need any extra time, just to kind of get them up to speed, and then they count as a body. So it's really great. And so we have plussed up our staffing. We had about 25, 26 vacancies. We filled 17 of them with the Pierce County folks. And once they're, like I said, they're all up to speed, they'll fully count those 17. And then we'll continue to hire, and we are continuing to hire. I sit on the oral board cadre, so all of the new hires for Tacoma, I oftentimes sit on their oral boards. And we still have a good influx of new hires as well. Our new hires just take a lot longer from the time that they actually get hired with the Tacoma Police Department to the time that they count as a body on the street on their own. It's usually about 18 months because of the academy is 6 months long, and then they have a ton of training, usually a month or two before the academy, and then a couple of months after the academy, and then they hit the street with their training officer for a minimum of 4 months. And provided that all goes smoothly and they don't need any extra, time on the street with a trainer, so it's anywhere from like 16 to 18 months. So the laterals are a huge help, but we're going to continue to hire. It's one of those things. It's tough for us, and I'm sure the fire department can speak to this too. It's really tough for us to keep up with attrition. So when we have a big influx of folks retiring, we might get plussed up by December 31st and only have 3 or 4 vacancies, and then we have a handful of folks that retire, and then you always have the onesie twosies who maybe move on or go to another department or something like that. So, but the staffing is going very well, to answer the question. Yes, sir.
Question. I noticed there's a sign, yellow, that says no BIA. Explain what that is or how they work with the city. I don't know anything about it at all.
So the BIA is the downtown district. We used to have designated, actually, community liaison officers, CLOs, that were assigned strictly to the BIA, the business district down there. And to my knowledge, and I'm not going to elaborate because I don't know a ton. It's not my sector to work, but it does fall under my supervisor. But as of right now, I believe there is no BIA officer. And I don't know what that's due to. It could be a combination of things. It could be staffing. It could be funding. But I think if I understood it correctly, they fund a position for them to have an officer that keeps an eye on the businesses down there. Currently, we don't have one. And I don't know what it looks like to go forward with one. Yeah.
Hilltop VA is something that Community Economic Development is working with the business district.
Oh, perfect.
So you'll have to have them.
What is it?
Yeah.
What is it?
What does it stand for?
Business improvement area.
Thank you.
Improvement area, there it is, yep.
Yep.
Business improvement area.
Stole the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Yes, miss.
Years ago, the police used to give out big pepper spray. We gotta go back.
I've never heard of that, and I don't have an answer to that question.
I can find out and
Yeah.
let Peter know. I have not, in my 8 years here, I've not ever heard of that.
This stuff is about 10 years ago.
Okay.
It was very nice.
Yeah.
You walk up
Yeah.
to the firefighters and you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll find out, and I'll definitely shoot Peter an email, and he can push the message out to you guys. But yeah, I'm not sure, I've never heard of it, so, but I'll find out for you.
But once you think about it, something came to recycling and the driver's seat, so
Wow.
spray.
Yeah,
Safe in your car.
it gives you distance for sure. Yeah, it's a helpful tool if, in an emergency.
Okay, big round. Oh, you got another
Sorry,
question?
there's one more back there.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, Joe.
We routinely have chop shops on our street, and they are set up, walking everything out and gone within like 5 minutes, so we wouldn't even have time to get a response. What are some ways that we can deter those? Mostly I'm pissed about getting woken up in the middle of the night, but also I appreciate there's a proper front board being attached to each time that they roll out.
Sure. Let's sidebar after this, but I don't know that there's necessarily a way to deter it. I would need to talk to you about where you live and kind of your block and your street specifically. But 100% of the time, please report it. Report it to the non-emergency number, report it to 911. I'm also going to encourage you to report it to 311 if you are familiar with the system. all of the police-related 311s come to Phil and I. Obviously, it sounds like it's a chronic problem, something that you guys have been dealing with for a while if you're saying they routinely show up. And so once that's on our radar, that's something that us as CLOs will then come out and take a look at, and then we'll start looking at the area and kind of looking at if there's houses that they're associated with, vehicles that they're associated with, and then we can kind of formulate a plan on what we can do to address it. As far as deterring it, that's hard, right? I mean, again, let's sidebar. If it's happening right outside of your house, I encourage you to put motion lights up and things like that, because typically things like people don't want to be seen when they're doing stuff like that. So lighting is great, but we can sidebar. But that's definitely, if you're having that as an issue, please report it, and don't just report it to one platform. Report it while it's in progress, and then once you've reported it while it's in progress, then turn around and jump on 311 and shoot a 311 over so that we can be aware of it as well, and we can start keeping an eye on it. But I'll come chat with you as soon as we're done up here.
Okay, big round of applause for.
Thank you all.
Don't see John Gaines. Alyssa from the Parks. I need to apologize to Alyssa. She was here for another meeting, and I didn't know she was sitting there. So
Okay, that was a couple months ago. Yeah, for sure. That was a couple of months ago. I haven't seen you all, I think, since August, because I think that was a September meeting, and then I was gone in October, so now here we are in November. And I am Elisa, and I do lead the long-range strategic planning at Parks Tacoma. I say that just to clarify that I try to know everything at Parks Tacoma, but because my job is long-range planning, I'm stronger in that suit than others. Probably you have heard that we are going through some pretty significant budget adjustments right now. We every year, if not every year, but we do adopt a two-year budget, a biennial budget, right? So the year in between, we always consider a budget amendment. So it is a normal process that the board right now is going through a budget amendment, and they had a first discussion about the amendment. With a number of changes to right-side our budget. Had that discussion last month in October, and then November 10th, which is next Monday, regular board meeting, the board will consider adoption of that budget amendment. So we have done our best to not have this impact programs. It has impacted staff. We're looking at a lot of different kinds of consolidations. But always putting safety and health at the top of that and protecting our programs. Have had to right-size some programs. We were trying to continue to do everything everybody wanted, and some programs really didn't have the kind of attendance that they needed. And so that was one of the reasons for the shortfall, many reasons, but underestimated revenues was certainly one of the things that contributed. So the board will be looking at that budget amendment for adoption next Monday. Usually I come up here and I read off to you all the highlighted events that are coming up. I'm going to remind you that we have a wonderful website that when you pull it up, it's got events. And part of the reason I do that is because I used to be spoon-fed all these events by our marketing and communications team, but there are some staff adjustments there, so they don't spoon-feed me as much. I have to do more homework, and I didn't do it tonight. So, but it's November, right? So there's great things that are coming up at Fort Nisqually as we get into the holiday season, celebrations that happen there, fun run always at North Point Center. I'm excited to see the emphasis on urban forestry tonight. I mentioned that I do long-range planning. One of the things that we're doing is looking at, we had some study done, okay, back up Lisa. Last year, we adopted our first climate action plan at Parks Tacoma, and one of the things, of course, that we are looking at in taking measures to address climate resiliency is tree planting, and what can we do in that regard. And so we did a study about managing our current inventory of trees, but of course we're limited on space. We only own so much land, and we want to make sure we have enough space for natural features as well as active features like fields and play structures.
So we did do a study of what it would take to really better manage our current inventory, and now we're launching an effort to look at more of a long-range planning effort about how can we better align our goals and our aspirations for natural areas to align with the goals in our climate action plan and also goals of the city's urban forestry program. So we're happy, we are thrilled to be a partner with the folks in the room tonight and others that I'm sure will be talked about. And one of those great events, I'll just note, is actually on the agenda, if you picked up the paper copy, November 8th, right, this coming Saturday at the Star Center, is an opportunity to, in the South End, do some tree planting with folks there who have ordered trees, who'll be getting trees through the Tacoma Tree Foundation. And we do know that the South End is a particularly underforested, significantly underforested area. So if you are available on Saturday, it would be a great way if you came out to the Star Center. And it says, does it say on here? No, but I know on our website, it advertises it as no experience needed. So pair of hands, you got a pair of hands, they could use your help. And one other thing I'll just mention is as we do move into the holiday season and the economy and state of the affairs are what they are, I will remind us that our community centers are more than fun and games recreation centers, particularly the People Center has resources, clothing, food, other support, and so look out for your neighbors, and if the People Center is a place where you can lend some support, we want to be that conduit to help all our neighbors in this community. So thanks.
Any questions for Alyssa? Thank you. A round of applause for Alyssa. Parks Commission President, who's in the room, who attends on a regular basis, so thank you for coming. Next up, Christina from the City Manager's Office.
Hi everyone, good to see you all tonight. Christina from the City Manager's Office. I also don't have a cool PowerPoint, and I don't even have a cool police car or a fire truck. Occasionally the City Manager's Office has city pins that are really awesome. So look out, TFT. I'm going to be very quick, just so you can get to Councilmember Walker's presentation, which I know a lot of you are excited about. But I did want to make sure that you're all aware that we have launched our nationwide search for Tacoma's next city manager. So this is very exciting, and we want to hear from all of you about what you're looking for and what you hope to see in our next city manager. So there's currently a survey available that you can take. It's at tacoma.gov/CM recruitment. And it's just a very brief survey, so but please take it and weigh in on what you'd like to see for our next manager. Thank you so much.
And the calls for Christina. John? Taking time to come out.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'll be back here at the Roman Energy Council meeting. I'm John Hines. She wants to customer about sends her regard or regrets. She wasn't able to be here this evening, so I'll be sending in for both of us all couple updates, and then any questions people have. Okay. It's really disaster. Okay, a couple things. Number one, the Christian Adams use study is completed. It's available online if you want to look at it. They will be here next week. Next month. The next meeting, you're not back here next week. Next month, they'll be back. Of course, John Gaines, Tanya Oldby from CED will be here, right? Who's presenting for that? Yeah. So we kind of answer questions about that. So I won't steal your thunder and talk about it next week. Just looking at my quick notes here. The bigger project, I think, and I'm probably should get questions about it, We updated the city's camping ordinance last month, passed 2 weeks ago. Basically, making some changes to kind of the buffer areas. So back in 2022, we passed a camping ordinance that you couldn't camp within 10 blocks of a temporary shelter. Since that has happened, we've had some requests from the school, from some of our permanent shelter operators that they had issues with campers around them. So updated the camping ordinance to say you couldn't camp within 10 blocks of one of our permanent shelters in the downtown core. We reduced the buffer areas in our shelters that are outside the downtown core, so like the one on 6th Orchard to 5 blocks. Then we added in 2-block buffers around schools, parks, and libraries. We'll maintain one around the water. The main goal of all this is, we're continuing through our process of doing outreach, engagement with anyone who's experiencing homelessness. Our HEAL team has grown from 3 people back in 2022 to 8 full-time staff people that are out doing outreach to people experiencing homelessness, trying to connect them to shelters and services. This policy is meant to kind of balance the impact on the campus near schools, parks, libraries, and permanent shelters, which is something I've heard from community members that really let us move forward on the policy. Again, just to kind of clarify, since the policy was passed in 2022, thousands of interactions the city has had with people experiencing homelessness. We see a higher incidence of people accepting shelter and services inside the buffer areas. They're more likely to accept shelter and services, though the number is still very low. We'd like to see that number grow and be higher. We want more of the people who are currently on the streets to kind of come into shelter and services. So that's the kind of next conversation going forward is like, well, what is it that people who are out there on the streets are looking for if we're not offering them something they want? We are seeing kind of a very low, I think the HEAL team says of the contacts, 80% of the people say we're not interested in shelter and services the city's offering. So we have to kind of rethink what are we offering to get more people to take us up on those offers. Since 2022, there was a concern about rearrests in the entire city since 2022. And of those 3 all went into the therapeutic court system, which is the policy change we made. So anybody who's arrested, this would go to therapeutic court, which is where you get attached to shelter services and things like that. And of the 3 people arrested, all 3 went to therapeutic court, one of which who'd been a long-time chronic homeless individual is now living independently, in housing, and on with their lives. So that was the kind of big uplift we did this last month. So I'm looking forward to the future conversation with my colleague, Christina Walker, who's back here, and some of the other community members about what we do as we think about how to get more people kind of out of encampments and into shelter services and moving on with their lives. That was a big kind of policy, and I'm sure there might be some questions about that. The only thing I wanted to talk about today before we go too much further was that I won't come up in any other conversations is we are voting for our pet mayor right now. Has anyone been following this at all? The partnership with the Tacoma Humane Society, we're voting for a pet mayor. It's a fundraiser for the Humane Society. So we have a primary. There was a critter, a cat, and a dog kind of primary. So the 3 that are moving on is Nacho is the cat, Copper is the dog, and Jar Jar Pig is the guinea pig. And it is a tough battle between Copper and Nacho right now to see who will be the next pet mayor. So this is an idea I got. I go to Orcas Island usually every 4th of July. And East Sound, anybody heard this? East Sound does a fundraiser for the Humane Society where animals run to be the mayor. And it's $1 per vote. It's a fundraiser for their Humane Society. So it's something I brought back to Tacoma. I thought it was a really good idea. So we're partnering this year with the Humane Society to do a pet mayor. It's raised over $12,000 for low-cost spaniel programs at the Humane Society. So if you'd like to participate and make a contribution and also vote for your pet mayor, that is up and open right now. I'm hoping, I will disclose who I'm voting for the pet mayor. My loss early in the primary, so I'll have to make this how we're going to go next. With that, are there any questions that you have? All right, see Joe, we have Jeff, Joe.
Obviously, homeless is a national issue. Every state, every city, every community has homeless. Some of the states are pressing forward with involuntary commitment. Where does involuntary commitment stand in Washington State? Do it?
Our state laws are very, very strict about involuntary commitment, so it's a very high bar. Actually, the only involuntary commitments that we currently can do is to our designated crisis responders, which are out of the police department, and of which you have to be a imminent threat to either yourself or others, in which they can do a 72-hour hold for you. But the bar in the state of Washington is very, very high. Some states like New York have talked about being more proactive on involuntary commitments, but their bar to do so is much, much lower. I do think that's probably a conversation we have at the statewide level. Joe's points are a good one. People tell me all the time, like, what's Tacoma doing about homelessness? I'm like, well, obviously this is only a Tacoma problem because no other city in the West Coast, the United States, is dealing with it. No, I mean, it's a problem not only here, regionally, nationally. So there's a conversation needs to be had about what we do in these situations. As many of you may know, like, I mean, the federal government has invested less and less in behavioral health since the 1970s and 80s. Fewer, beds are available for people that are dealing with behavioral health issues. And so there's a conversation about how do we kind of match those. The state is being sued right now, and the decision says they're underinvesting, so they're quickly trying to set up as many as they can. But that's something we're going to have to talk about, that we, the state, are going to have to figure out.
Following on Joe's comment,
Yeah.
there was an article about the successful City of Five program for employing homeless people.
Yeah.
I think we've heard from the Port of Tacoma that they actually give money to the City of Five for that. Is that something that the City of Tacoma has looked at?
Yeah, we Vallejo Vocation and the city has partnered in the past about looking for ways to kind of get people engaged with work as part of it, especially people that are formerly homeless. When I was on the board of Family Promise of Pierce County, one of the things that their directors looking to try to do, which I think is a cool idea, is some of those folks can't work 40 hours a week. They can work a certain amount of time. And so this organization is working to partner with employers to say, like, well, how many hours a week do you need a dishwasher? How many hours a week do you need work to do this? And then trying to match people with hours. So like using kind of a model like that around kind of people experiencing homelessness through family problems. It sounds an interesting idea. The five model is good too, for a certain subset of the population. I think one of the challenges with homelessness is we conflate it I talk to a lot of people about homelessness. We conflate it when it makes sense for us, and we try to break it apart when it makes sense for us, right? And the answer to the question is, there's a certain subsection of the population experiencing homelessness where work is important. There's a certain subsection where they already have jobs, so we're not worried about that. There's a certain subsection that they can't work. And so I have to figure kind of how we start. But I do think looking at more models around that are good. There's some cities that have really done a lot of work with that. Job histories, credit, employment history. Really good. Did you have do you want to ask your question first before I come over to Tom? Okay, Tom.
How are you feeling about tomorrow?
Oh man, well I'm not going to talk about tomorrow right now, but I'm hopefully going to go home and sleep well tonight, and then we'll see what happens. But we can talk. I can talk to you directly later. Talk about that. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I'll be here, and no matter what happens tomorrow, I'll be here for at least a few more years. So thank you all very much.
Big round of applause. Try and keep moving. Under our bylaws, we have to have elections in November for 50% of the board. We have up to 15 board members. So the nominations committee, also known as the existing board, did some solicitation, and we did get a few volunteers. Is there anybody else who is interested in being on the board? If not, the nominations committee is suggesting re-electing Toby Bett, Jody Cook, Georgette Ruta, I always get so, Jeff Corso, Daniel Venegas, and Sandra Strong to 2-year terms. So, and then we have 2 new candidates, Joe Strong and Debbie Anderson, who would be elected to complete a 2-year term but only do the last year of it. So that tries to even out how many people get elected. So if there is no opposition, I would like to accept those nominations and elections by acclamation, which just means don't shout no. And if not, we will then move on to our next interesting piece of business. So Steve Atkinson has graciously allowed Councilmember Walker to go ahead of him in the order. So if you could put up Councilmember Walker's presentation, and this is part of Councilmember Walker's outreach to all of the different neighborhood councils. So welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Christina Walker, I'm one of the at-large city council members, and as noted in your agenda, the chair of the Infrastructure Planning and Sustainability Committee.
Excuse me. Can you stand this side of the table because the Zoom?
Yes. Tell me where to go. Oh, I'd like to move around so much.
You can put it up the table.
Okay, thank you. Mike and I are on a little bit of a road show going to neighborhood councils. I'm not sure how many this is. We're not quite done. We're not at the beginning.
Seven.
We're big fans of the one Tacoma Comprehensive Plan, though. So the purpose of today's meeting is to give you a little grounding in where we are in terms of urban forestry, and then we have questions for you. So we're shaping this policy over the next year, and we don't want to do that without the community. So we're really here to ask you questions, and we can. We also don't want to take up the entire meeting. I know a few questions were sent ahead of time. I think Mike might touch on those, but they aren't really to do with this policy itself, although we're happy to talk about them later. But we're going to stay focused on this urban forestry program. Mike's going to give us a little why is Tacoma's urban forest important, a little background, and then we're going to dig into the policy itself and ask your questions. You all know Christina because she already spoke. She's taking notes and has been at every one of the neighborhood council meetings. So we're gathering those all together and we'll have a report back to the IPS committee. For that, I will turn it over to you.
Councilmember Walker, am I in the right spot?
Yes.
Look, you got the table.
All right. Once again, Mike Carey, I'm the Urban Forest Program Manager here with the City of Tacoma. And we were just here a couple months ago with Lowell Wise as well, talking about urban forestry in Tacoma. So I won't do too much wrapping up what we talked about last time because that was a pretty in-depth conversation. But I did want to take just a few moments to kind of set us, kind of ground us a little bit in what the discussion will be about today with Councilmember Walker. She'll ask some pointed questions about some specific policy choices. So really quickly, why is Tacoma's urban forest important? It's essential. The trees that we have in our cities help to clean the air, cool our neighborhoods, reduce stormwater runoff, and improve public health outcomes. Actually, I was just having a conversation with Tom earlier, and it sounds like we might be putting a new resource on your website as well about the benefits of trees for our communities. When I came a couple of months ago, I had a whole stack of flyers of a report called Outside Our Doors, and it's a 20-something page report of all things trees and people benefit our communities. So our goal with our urban forestry program in Tacoma is to increase tree canopy cover while ensuring that equitable distribution of trees for all of our neighborhoods across Tacoma. There was mention earlier about from Elisa about a program that we're doing this weekend. It's a program called Branch Out. We do it every year. It's a free tree giveaway to homes who need it and low canopy neighborhoods. And this year's request between Branch Out and that program as well was the most we've ever seen. We specifically targeted the south end of Tacoma, and we got requests for about 500 trees, street trees this year, which is pretty phenomenal. Again, it's because a lot of community members are starting to recognize those direct benefits of trees to health outcomes in our community, and they want to see those health outcomes improve for their neighbors, their family, and their friends. So it's a pretty tremendous program. Please, if you have capacity to join us this weekend, come out and help plant trees with us. Okay. So we're even talking about who cares for Tacoma's urban forest. In a nutshell, it's all of us. We all have a role to play in care for Tacoma's urban forest. So our program works to benefit and sustain healthy, vibrant communities for everyone. And the city of Tacoma proper, as an entity, provides maintenance and care for trees on city-owned lands and right-of-way adjacent to city-owned lands. But as a percentage of the total city, the city only owns 2% of the land area in Tacoma. So our kind of control and maintenance is not as significant as everybody else showing up to help support in the community. Residents are responsible for trees on their private property, as well as in the right-of-way that abuts their private property. This is a really important distinction. A lot of phone calls that I get as an urban forester for Tacoma are folks who are calling about a street tree in front of their home. And they want to say, hey, it's sick, it needs water, it needs help, it needs pruning. And I get to inform them during those phone calls, it's actually your tree, your responsibility, and please go out there and do the actions that you think are necessary to keep it healthy. And I will say the overwhelming majority of phone calls we get are people who just don't understand that street trees are their trees. Again, the city only owns 2% of the land area, and that's kind of what our control is. Just to break down what the right-of-way is for folks who might not be familiar with that designation, it's the area outside of parcel boundaries. So think about it, it's the area that contains sidewalks and roadways, typically public utilities, are all located in that right-of-way area. Let's see, I think that's all I'm going to say for now. Okay, and then now we're going to talk a little bit about work we're doing currently to enhance our urban forest moving forward. I'm going to hand it over to Councilmember Walker.
All right, so as mentioned earlier, we did pass a resolution. It is a very long one, and it is going to take us 2 full years to get through it. And this is because we're going to do it very thoroughly. And it is a land use change, so everything that's a land use change has to go through the planning commission. So there's a lot of process, which is great because we get community input along the way at every step. People are frustrated we can't turn around and do it tomorrow, but I promise you we need a little bit more time to get it right. So that's where you come in right now. So we're looking at options to expand and fund city maintenance of trees in the right-of-way, like we're just talking about those. And then potential new land use and development regulations for tree canopy management and preservation. So, question is for you, and I'll repeat the answers too so that folks can hear on the Zoom. But who should be responsible for maintaining trees in the public right-of-way, the city or private residents? If the city were to consider maintaining trees in the right-of-way, it would require revenue to support the work. Is that a service you would support paying? Some examples of the maintenance would be pruning, watering, removing hazardous trees, and that could be paid for through a fee or a tax. Is that something you support paying for?
How are you going to assess it? Linear feet of frontage? What is it?
Good question. So the question was how we would assess it. We haven't gotten that far yet, is the answer. And to your point, there are a lot of different ways to do it. So I got a couple yeses.
So do you want to show of hands, yes and no?
What's that?
Show of hands for yes and no?
Sure.
Well, it's not a dichotomy. That's not how it's structured.
Yeah. And the commenter said it's not a dichotomy, and that's what we're digging into here. So probably the show of hands is not as valuable as you might think, because there are questions that go along with that. But I'm generally hearing some, like, it's worth exploring how we would do that.
How that revenue is kind of aggressive sort of tax where, everyone pays $5 or more, or more, maybe, or less. It depends on how the revenue is.
Okay, so this commenter said it depends on how it's gathered and how it's assessed. Any other thoughts on that, or we'll move on to the next one? Yeah.
One thought, my neighbors talked about this, is if we have to do it, we should only have to pay 3, not our whole footage. Some of us have got 100 feet, but we may only have 3.
Okay.
So that's something to consider. You can charge us by tree, or if you're going to do it, or if we just do it ourselves.
So the comment is, would you be paid, or have to pay per tree or per frontage? And if you're already doing it yourself, would you have to pay, or could you pay a different rate?
So if a right of way can handle more trees, like it sounds like that would, the trees can't be that way.
That could be, sure.
So what would be the charge if you chose not to plant trees in your parking strip? Would like the fee be higher maybe to encourage planting of trees? What's houses?
So the suggestion is maybe you could get charged more if you didn't already have trees planted.
Yeah, because what you're saying kind of it disincentivizes planting of trees, is what I'm hearing here.
That's a good point.
Charging by tree or.
Sure.
So
if we all were assessed the same fee, it would disincentivize folks from planting their own trees. Is that, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about for sure.
It's a risk.
Hmm.
Thinking about, people, process in place now. But when someone damages a tree, tree on the right of way, you kind of, they cut a little, there should be kind of going. The right of way tree is the front owner, is the responsibility of the property. So the city does not own the tree. So if the property owner removes the tree, then is there any city policies that now, is there no penalty for that?
Yeah, I'm gonna take a quick pause before our next question and have Mike give like a 2-second trees in the right of way. Because this is important that we did update the trees in the right of way policy.
That's a great question. So trees in the right of way are considered public infrastructure. So they're private ownership, but they benefit the public, just like streets and sidewalks and utilities, right? There's a public benefit there to having those street trees. So they're regulated. When you put in a permit to remove a tree, if it's a perfectly healthy, thriving tree, there's a canopy reduction fee that you would pay that then goes to pay to plant trees elsewhere to offset those negative impacts to the community. That was a quick answer to your question.
On top of that, have you thought about an incentive for homeowners like myself who have way too many that we do prune? It might be nice to have an incentive, people would be able to get something off of their property tax or whatever, for doing the right thing. Has that come up?
I think that's what we're here to gather feedback on.
Oh, excellent. Well, there's my feedback.
Thank you for that, and we will definitely take note of it, and we have heard that at other places too. So if you couldn't hear, it's incentives for folks who are already planting trees or already pruning trees. Okay, I'm gonna move us on to the next question because I know we have a lot to get through. Do you think that trees on private property provide public benefits? For example, does your house or sidewalk receive any shade from trees located on your neighbor's property? Do you believe that having trees enhances the livability and health of your neighborhood? Should a property owner be allowed to remove any tree on private property for any reason? Or do you believe there should be specific restrictions on when tree removal can take place? For example, restrictions could include the size of the tree or the reason for removal. For example, what if a property owner wants to remove a large tree because they can no longer rake up the leaves each season? Should they be allowed to do so? So, do you think there should be specific restrictions on when removal can take place?
Yes.
Any examples of what would be an appropriate restriction? Yeah, go ahead.
Tree commercial that shows up frequently, which the guy is trying to sell you a tour says the most important resource is time. Trees. Taking down a big tree and planting a lollipop or no tree isn't fair. There are developed technical regimes for mitigating the removal of a large tree and a replacement, and that allows for time. You don't plant a little tree, they end up planting quite a few little trees. And because time can't be replaced, the services that the tree would provide in the present day and over time going forward actually have monetary value. That can be recovered through these programs.
So Joe, skipping ahead to the next question, which is the replacement of the tree and making sure that it's not a one-to-one ratio. So is there a reason that a big tree could come down in your scenario?
lot out. It's senescent, not every senescent tree should be down, but literally, physically, a hazard to life or limb structures, then it has to be marked.
So a hazard to life, limb, or structure, okay.
So could you bring questions about healthy trees? So that we're all kind of giving you the same answer? Like, if you ask these questions about healthy trees?
Sure, let's focus the question on healthy trees, that's fine.
So for example, on my property, my prior owner had planted an evergreen that was underneath the power lines from the street to my house. When the city came out because it kept creating a problem, they recommended that we just cut the tree down because they had all that. So I think that would be an example, removing a large tree.
So the tree was in the power lines.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm the person in the neighborhood with the big trees, all of them, like about 7 of them. And what would be really helpful for me is having access to an arborist who can help me know how to maintain them. I would like some kind of incentive to keep my trees, because they're a mess, they're horrible, they get there, it's a constant battle, but I love them. But it would be really nice to have more incentives for those of us that are keeping our trees.
Okay, so incentive for keeping the trees, similar to the other incentive conversation, but also having access to an arborist.
Access to an arborist would be so wonderful.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Trees develop in non-urban areas. And now, increasingly, we have trees that are 100 years old, in some cases longer, and they're growing and they're spreading, and a lot of the consequence of having some of these beautiful, very old trees are in direct directly opposite for having homes and sewer lines and power lines and all of that. So these questions are a little too simplistic because there's so many issues with, I just don't want to get rid of the tree because of the view that it's blocked, or, those sorts of things, which a lot of people might say, that's a little easier to analyze. But a lot of us are struggling with this great tree, but it's breaking the sidewalk, breaking my sewer line, getting in the way of the power line, on and on. We've all been through that. So, you need a lot more help rather than I want to cut down my tree. Yes or no?
Yeah, thank you. You're hitting the nail on the head in terms of the complexity of this. But I appreciate that, asking for help and incentives rather than restrictions. Did you want to add something?
I was just going to say that I think exactly those points that you just mentioned is what we were seeking out here in this conversation, is what are the impacts or the conflicts that warrant a tree's removal. If utilities being collapsed, if the sidewalks may be heaved, if it's a hazard, if it's from under an overhead power line, does that qualify it into a category where you would say, yes, like that should be able to be removed? And then I think there's going to be another question here. More details.
We're talking about large trees, and I just want to make sure that we're not going to incentivize now pruning of large trees. If I can't remove the tree, am I going to be able to top it, for example, so it's no longer a hazard? Not that I would do that, but I'm just wondering if we'd also setting up incentives to do terrible things to trees if we can't remove them.
That is certainly not our goal. So it's a very good point. How do we support carrying out the policy in the way we want to see it? So I'm going to move us on to the next question. In order to continue contributing to our tree canopy, should the city charge a fee to remove a tree on private property? So assume it's a hazard tree, or maybe hazard's not the right example, but it's growing into the sewer line. So we've deemed it okay to remove. Should you have to get a permit and pay a fee, and then we can use that fee to plant more trees? Should we use that money to plant trees elsewhere in the city or in the neighborhood to replace the lost benefits? Right now, the city does not charge a fee to have a tree removed on private property. So should we charge a fee for you to remove a tree?
Just thinking in the case of if you're already having to get rid of this tree you love, and then pay to get rid of the tree you love, a fee to the city, how about replacing your sewer line? I think a lot of people are
already enough of a hit when people see how much it costs to replace the sewer line.
You were told before that before you could plant a tree, you had to get permission. Some sort of permission. People should not be planting trees in the area where they're not supposed to. Like that. So is that something you're going to educate us more on? If you want us to plant, you have to have a permit. How much that permit costs us? Plant.
Education is always going to be part of our work. Well, I mean, you guys a ton of education. I was going to say education isn't part of the policy, but it certainly could be. We could require or commit ourselves to doing a certain amount of education.
Well, just to add on to that, 'cause you mentioned a permit and requirements around that. Currently, a permit only applies to tree planting in the right of way, so that area outside of parcel. You do not have to get a permit to plant on your private property. Oh, the right of way, okay, great. So yeah, currently you do have to obtain a permit and there are standards. So when you get a permit, you have to demonstrate that it's in compliance with the standards, which means offset from pavements, utilities, can't be a big trend or power line, all that stuff is already regulated.
Are you considering rolling into this, as we move forward, not if, when, taking care of the sidewalks? Because that seems like it's always so many people's issues, and they're told they have to replace it or kill the tree because, that's part of it maybe?
So when you say, are we considering it, meaning for the city to pay for it when?
Correct, yeah, or to fix the sidewalk or whatever, there's lots of amendments that could be made to a piece of cement, but if they have to remove it, would the city maybe, could that be part of this whole plan?
So I'm here for suggestions, so I just want to make sure that I understand your suggestions. So you as a homeowner have a sidewalk that has been changed from the tree.
Right.
You're going to take the tree out, and then your suggestion is that the city would then pay for the sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
Some
it's
of
going
those
to
they
take
have
40
no,
years
yeah.
to fix our existing sidewalk issues without even adding new ones. I don't know if everybody's aware of that, but 30 years just to fix the existing issues or missing sidewalks we have as of this one moment.
This is true, we have a lot of missing sidewalks.
Yes.
So, but it sounds like I misunderstood the suggestion. This is, we want to keep the tree and have the city fix the sidewalk.
Yes.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
I know in my neighborhood, there's large trees and sometimes there's conflict between neighbors about the damage the tree growing on one parcel is doing to the homeowners, their neighbor's house or whatever. How is that going to work here in terms of the homeowner with the tree then has to pay to get the permit to remove it when they've been sued by their neighbor because the tree is damaging their house?
What do you think?
Yeah,
Should you be able to dictate what your neighbor does with their tree?
Well, I mean, I think that's a really good question because especially when there's a court involved in a judge's decision and there's financial penalties and insurance claims, damage the tree is doing to your neighbor's house.
So court aside, legal issues aside, because I'm not a court or a judge, we want to set up a policy that's going to work for most people. So do you want to be able to tell your neighbor, hey, your tree is damaging my sidewalk, your foundation,
Yeah.
and would that be a reason to ask a neighbor to remove a tree? Does that sound okay?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a good reason.
Yeah. We've had at other councils too, people have brought up, well, my neighbor's tree was providing beautiful shade for my yard, and they took it down because it was hurting their foundation, and now I don't have any shade. So should you be able to say, neighbor, you have to keep your tree?
No.
Yeah,
To add to their points, I live on a street with 11 or 12 neighbors just on our block. Two of them are mine, and I'm still living up. And it is absolutely beautiful. We have people come take pictures, it's gorgeous. But of course, our sidewalks are like this. So I think to add to the incentive program, because I'm gonna have to splurge $4,000 out of it, fix my sidewalk. But to do that, it would be nice to have, again, the incentive, keep the trees, they're not going anywhere, I'm not getting rid of them. But I do log them and all the rest, and have a little bit of money from the city, who, by the way, planted those trees, 60 years ago, just saying, erroneously thinking that they weren't going to grow at a normal level, and now doing us with the cleanup. Do you think that that's something that would be really helpful? Because we're going to do it, but it would be really nice to have a little incentive. So I would add timber.
So sidewalk fund incentive specific to trees.
It's going to surprise you, Christine, to know that there is a whole body of law surrounding trees in neighborhoods. Literally going back to the time of kings, having had a neighbor tree fall on my property, neighbor was not obligated to take it. This tree, until it fell on my property, then it became my tree. So no, and if your neighbor's giving you nice shade, be thankful, but no, you can't make them give you your shade back. Can't make them take your tree down or improve your view. You can ask nicely, you might provide an incentive, but there is an extensive body of law. My neighbor's tree is rotting. I can prove that he knew it was rotting before it fell on my house, I have a claim. Unless I can prove he knew it was dangerous, I don't have a claim. So talk to the city attorney as you proceed here, and he or she needs to dig deeply into quote tree law.
We will, don't worry. I appreciate that, thank you. I got one here, and then we'll wrap it up. But I will take questions, comments, for the rest of the time we're working on this, so don't worry, this isn't your last time to comment.
So I just want everybody to answer all these very good questions. Want to answer. We live now in one of the poor areas, but it's changing. I have lived in city, Michigan, and Ontario. Humidity and heat are coming. Unless we have a solid plan, like many of those cities do, starting the right of way, they do manage the right of way. Yes, get to be charged because you own a house in a city. We help incentives and amenities that we have to provide. We're not going to get people. Sorry?
No, go ahead.
So we are not going to be able to stay out of the court, but at least provide a solution. Look at Minneapolis, see what they have done. There still is responsibility as homeowner for your sidewalk. Yes, that's a part of it. There could be ways instead of taking trees down, there could be rooting them. But I think the city should be on deciding what tree in the right way. So they are cooling off roads and the sidewalk. We'll encourage people, everybody wants everybody walking everywhere. But when it's hot out, go in their cars, driving air conditioning. So I really, really strongly that live in a city, there's things that we are taxed for the greater community good. And not to all get stirred up on a lot of the details of this. Focus on the right of way, have the city go ahead and serve as an example of what's important to encourage people to maintain their trees. There's other ways to go out. Then thank you for people who put the trees on their property. You have to remember, trees add to the value. So there's a responsibility with that. And
Thank you. I think we have one more over here. Yeah, go ahead.
I also one of those big trees on the corner of 27th. And it is dying, there's two of them, and they're dying from the inside. And they have both fallen, huge limbs that go all the way across the road, and the city has to come out and have to cut it all up. It happened 6 times now. So as far as removing that, I cannot get a hold of anybody but the city. They keep telling me that the arborist isn't in.
that they can't come out and look at
That's
you.
you.
They're drawn to you.
And I'm afraid that is that gonna be a liability to me, since it was planted 80 years ago? Now it's too huge. And it wraps around the lamppost that the light is supposed to shine on the road, but it's all covered in blue.
So I'm going to hand it over to Mike to answer that. I just wanted to flag, if you have additional things, please send it my way. When you go to that link and send something to me, it goes directly to my inbox. So please let me know if you have further questions, comments. And we are getting updates up on our website as well, and we'll make sure and send those out to Peter so you have them. But I do want Mike to at least be able to answer this question quickly before we go. Thank you so much for having us.
I'm afraid it's
Maybe you and I should chat after this.
I have a coffee and espresso cafe. Coffee.
Yes, it'll just go back to the comment I made earlier about streets in the right of way and responsibility of abutting owners. And so the city of Tacoma, we take responsibility to keep the passage of the right of way safe. And so if there's a limb that has fallen, block the right of way, that's when we will dispatch our crews to clean up the limb. But we don't do the actual tree removal itself. That's again, the abutting property owner's responsibility is the short answer to that question. Now there's incentive programs and support programs too that again, you and I can talk more about directly, but that is the short answer, is that it is the abutting property owner, not the city.
Even with wrapping around.
And with that, goes back to the question we asked about who should be responsible, and it sounds like you might have some comments on that.
I have quite a few.
So thank you very much for the presentation. For reaching out. Mike, we see you on a regular basis. Thank you, Christina, for coming. Would it be helpful if we, as the NENC and the board, compile questions and send them to you? I know when we had our candidate forum last month, we had 16 pages of questions for the candidate. So it does enable us to sort of go through them and educate us. So if that would be helpful, we could do that. So how about a big round of applause for the... Yes, you're now in old business, so you can come back and give us updates. So now, thank you very much, Steve, for bearing with. We had to switch around the program, so I'd like to introduce Steve Atkinson, who's going to give us a presentation on the comprehensive plan. I'll let you do the intro.
Awesome, thank you. I'm Steve Atkinson, City of Tacoma Planning Development Services. I'm Principal Planner in our Long Range Planning Division. This is not my presentation, but it looks gorgeous. And one thing I'll have to keep an eye on is now that Councilmember Walker has done as sort of my guardrail, knowing my councilmember was up next, to keep my presentation short and concise. So it sounds like we've got all night now to talk about Long Range Planning. So thank you for that time. Let's see. Just hit the. All right. So in general, kind of a short purpose tonight, but wanted to take a little bit of a look back on the process we went through recently to update the city's comprehensive plan, what that plan is, what some of the key outcomes are from that effort. And then one of the key things I wanted to focus on a little bit at the end is what is some of the planning that is coming up next. So a little bit of a review and hindsight, and then looking ahead. What are some of the things we'll be working on here at the City of Tacoma? You just heard one great example of some things that you may want to pay attention to, be interested in, either individually or as a neighborhood council. I'm going to give a little bit of sort of a 101. I'm going to assume not everybody is as familiar with State of Washington planning or City of Tacoma planning. So in general, in the State of Washington, City of Tacoma, all of our long-range planning work really starts with state law. And that is really fundamentally about the State Growth Management Act, which really establishes kind of the guardrails for how we do planning in Washington State. The Growth Management Act was adopted in the early 1990s, generally predicated on the idea that kind of unencumbered urban sprawl is actually really detrimental to our overall environmental and community health, and results in a built environment that is more costly to serve
And you can think about this just in terms of things like transit. You know, when you have a broad, sprawling, low-density environment, much harder to provide transit support and transit service to those areas because you have to travel a lot further. And there's a lot more cost associated with the length of time associated with that travel. So generally, the cost of providing services and infrastructure becomes more expensive when we are sprawling and seeing a lot of that sort of development pattern. So the Growth Management Act was really established to ensure that there was a commonality in how all jurisdictions in the state are dealing with growing as communities, as urban areas, and trying to steer growth the way that it makes the most sense. And generally under state law, that means already urban areas like Tacoma. So locating and focusing growth where we already have the service to provide it. The Growth Management Act guides everything in our planning from the name comprehensive plan is something decided by the Growth Management Act. The number and types of chapters and subject matter that we deal with in local long-range planning is very frequently based on things that are required under the State Growth Management Act. There are specific regulations that we're required to adopt in the city of Tacoma to ensure compliance with state GMA. That's what planners refer to as GMA. And then there's also procedural requirements. So there's a process we have to go through to do our planning, to adopt the comprehensive plan, to change the comprehensive plan. And there's a commitment there to trying to be transparent, to working with our communities, involving people in the decisions that affect them. So the Growth Management Act addresses both content and process and procedure for how we do planning in the state of Washington. What you can see on the left here is one of the other underpinnings of state growth management planning, which is this is not about turning off the tap for growth. This is about making sure that everybody is actually planning for and accommodating the growth that we expect to happen in the state. So these numbers here on the left are the targets that the city of Tacoma is required to plan for. 137,000 new residents by 2050. We have around 228,000 people in the city of Tacoma today. 60,000 new housing units and 94,000 new jobs. There is a lot that goes into these numbers before they even come to the city of Tacoma. So generally, following the U.S. Census, the State Office of Management develops long-term forecasts with statewide population growth and countywide growth. Those numbers are pretty accurate in retrospect. If we go back and look at the last 20 years of what's happened in the state of Washington, generally the growth that was predicted to happen has happened. But what OFM is doing is really kind of is the projections. Then what happens here in Puget Sound through the Growth Management Act and Vision 2050 is that growth then gets allocated across all the jurisdictions that comprise central Puget Sound. So Pierce County, King County, Snohomish, and Kitsap. And that is where sort of these growth trends, where and how much growth is actually happening in the state, what those projections look like, turn into a plan for how to try to guide that growth to where it makes the most sense. And so those kinds of decisions get made at the regional level for all 4 of these counties. But before we get these numbers, Pierce County also then goes through the process of taking the population forecasts and turning those into housing units. So at a statewide level, we have population projections. At the county level, those population projections are then converted and analyzed into how many units they represent. So in a city like Tacoma, we have fewer people per household than a community like Bonnie Lake. So serving the same number of people will mean we need more housing units than Bonnie Lake does, because they are going to have a higher average number of people in each household. And then one of the new wrinkles during this last, and all of this is like work that happens before we even start our process for our comprehensive plan update. One of the new wrinkles in this last few legislative cycles is new requirements were added in that not only do we have to plan for these levels of growth, but now the State Department of Commerce has to evaluate the level of affordability that we expect. So we are now talking about 137,000 new residents. What are the assumptions we're making about what we think these new Tacomans can actually afford? And what kinds of housing types we need to plan for in order to try to meet those income needs? So it's a whole other level now. And that generally with the state, this was another state Department of Commerce assessment, came up with, based on their analysis, effectively 65% of all new housing units in Pierce County need to be affordable in order to meet the level of demand for housing affordability. So again, what this tells us is, long term, when we're thinking about the future of Pierce County, what our kids or grandkids can afford, the cost mismatch is just increasing. And that level of need is going to continue increasing, not just in Tacoma, but really across Pierce County. So there's a lot of stage setting that happens before even a city like Tacoma starts to do our planning locally about how do we plan for where these 137,000 new residents will live. Where do we plan for it? How do we plan for what it means to have 94,000 more jobs in the city of Tacoma and 60,000 more housing units? And what does that mean for things like our tree canopy? There's going to be obviously impacts as well as opportunities with that kind of growth. So in terms of our comp plan, so the growth is a really important underpinning, but it's not the only thing that's in the comprehensive plan. But this is going to sound like something very obvious, but it's called a comprehensive plan because it's supposed to be comprehensive. It's not just the housing plan, even though we talk a lot about housing, because that is really one of the top of mind issues right now. It's also an economic development plan. It's about parks and recreation. It's about how we protect the natural resources that we do have in the city of Tacoma. So part of the idea of having a comprehensive plan is that we're not just thinking about housing by itself on its own terms. We're thinking about how our plan for housing relates to how we are planning for transportation. You know, there's a relationship between where housing occurs and the cost of transportation and being able to get to work. There's also an air quality and other kinds of environmental impacts by how we plan for the location of jobs and housing. We also know that the more we grow, the more people who live in Tacoma, the more calls for service there will be for fire, police, EMS. There's going to be more demands for things like power, water, sewer, utilities, basic infrastructure in the city. So part of the comprehensive plan is intended to think about growth in terms of where it happens in the city, to be thoughtful about planning for where we want growth to happen, how we connect that growth, how we continue to protect our natural resources even while we grow. And spoiler alert, we actually can accommodate all of that housing and jobs without actually being forced to develop our wetlands, lose our streams, lose our fish and wildlife, see development occurring on steep slopes. But believe me, we've heard from a lot of people who believe that we should be sacrificing a lot of those natural resources in the city of Tacoma in the name of housing and job development. But that's part of the role of planning here in Washington State and City of Tacoma, is to try to get away from the zero-sum game, think about how we can accommodate that. But these are all deliberate choices that have to be made. And these are choices that end up ultimately coming to the city council at the end of the public process to get those decisions and those key things made. Now, the other thing I'll just mention here really quick, comprehensive plans and comprehensive planning is long-term. So these are 25-year plans. And it's not necessarily about what's going to happen and what's going to change tomorrow. For those kinds of near-term discussions, the city has a strategic plan that's really focused on the next 6 years, the next decade. To think more about how we make improvements, how we fundamentally change to address concerns people have today. The comp plan is thinking about what is our long-term public interest, and how do we help support decisions that take into account the long term, so we can make decisions today that change and respond to things that are happening, but trying to do so in a way that still supports our long-term goals as a community. So again, another way you can think about this is we don't need to make decisions today to say, you know what, we're going to get rid of our wetland protection because housing is so important today. You can think about the long term. We actually need to support the maintenance and preservation of those wetlands and the functions they provide, and we can do that in the long term while still meeting the other needs we have as a community. Throughout our update, and I'll kind of mention, actually, no, I'm going to go back here and I'll probably go too long in the presentation, but there were a few areas just in this recent update. So that's sort of the 101 of kind of what this is, what are some of the reasons why we do this work. In terms of the recent update that we had, probably no surprise, there was a lot of focus on housing. And the state has been taking a very active role in adopting new legislation to guide what we as the jurisdiction do. In the past, if you heard me come out and give this presentation, I probably have a strong focus on home rule. The state gives us broad goals. Our role as a community is we have a lot of flexibility about how we meet those goals. What we're starting to see is a lot more specific prescriptive direction from the state adopted through the Growth Management Act about not just what the goals are, but actually how we achieve those goals. So there is a sense, I think, regionally that cities and local jurisdictions have not actually done enough to address the kinds of housing issues that we have as a region. So the state is starting to step in more, be more prescriptive about how we have to respond to the housing crisis. In a little bit of a different circumstance than other jurisdictions. Most cities and counties went through their comp plan process the last 2 years. While they were doing that, and then in the 6 months after, they were expected to adopt new zoning to allow middle housing. City of Tacoma did it a little bit in reverse. We started about 6 years ago with Home in Tacoma, a little thing called Home in Tacoma. I'm sure you've heard of it. But that started with a city council directive to start to update our comprehensive plan and our zoning, 5, 6 years ago, leading into that decision. So one message here is, because we already did the hard work of Home in Tacoma, we were actually ahead of all the other jurisdictions. So this comp plan update, we did not change or modify our zoning and development standards. We do not have to do any additional area-wide rezoning or change the city's growth strategy to accommodate the new housing targets and the middle housing requirements in the state. We already did that through Home in Tacoma. So partly, we were just documenting in kind of a retrospective what decisions we've made and how that met the state requirements. There were some significant updates in this effort. So if I was going to call out chapters that kind of went through major updates, our environment and watershed health chapter in particular was responding and updating to a lot of new state requirements to have a better integration between stormwater management and water quality in our local comprehensive planning. There's a lot more focus on that connection between stormwater and land use. You will see in that chapter updates on what we were talking about. Tree canopy is a citywide goal, 30% tree canopy by 2030, but also, as you heard Mike talk about, something that came out of the comp plan update was a stronger focus on ensuring that all neighborhoods across the city are meeting that 30% goal. So we know today that tree canopy is not equally distributed. Not every neighborhood has the same amount of tree canopy. It's not, in some cases, it's concentrated in some places and dispersed in others. So part of the update that we were doing was to not just look at the 30 by 30, but collecting the data that can help inform where those discrepancies are across the city. And then to start to think about how can we craft goals and policies that relate to how we might reorient our programs or our investments depending on what communities are actually significantly behind that tree canopy goal. As we heard earlier today during the previous discussion, tree canopy is strongly connected and impervious surface to urban heat island effect. So we can start to think about that in terms of health outcomes. If we have a lack of tree canopy and a lot of concrete, you're likely going to have a much more pronounced heating effect. That does result in significant health impacts and even deaths every year from these heat events. So part of what the update we went through was not necessarily to revisit every single goal that we had as a city. So the goal was still 30 by 30, but to think more from an equity lens, how we can operationalize this to think about the inequities across Tacoma, and then at a policy level, what should we be thinking about how we can intervene in those inequities to try to create better, more equitable outcomes across the city. A few other things. I'll talk a little bit about the transportation chapter a little bit later. And then, as I mentioned earlier, part of comprehensive planning is about thinking about infrastructure needs, service demands. So the public facilities and services chapters and thinking about what are the kinds of projects we need, investments that we need in our infrastructure and services over the next 25 years to serve not just the population here today, but who may be here and the population that we're expecting to come up over the life of this plan. So these are all terms that we've used a lot in our planning in the past. We've talked a lot about opportunity, how we can support neighborhoods that are more opportunity rich to give people access to cultural resources, parks and recreation, easier access to their schools, the ability to take a bus if they want to, or walk to neighborhood businesses and hang out and meet with their friends. We've talked a lot about equity and how we think about equity and having policies that support more equitable development in the city of Tacoma. Public health, safety, sustainability are climate resilience, different ways that you might want to talk about it, have all been part of our planning in the past, part of the kind of fabric of what we do in the city of Tacoma. But a big part of this effort was about trying to operationalize what we mean by these terms. So realizing that we want our policies to be more effective, we need to be clear about what are we talking about when we use these terms, and what do we know about our current city. So we need to have a better baseline for, and I'll use tree canopy again, the distribution of trees across the city, so we can start to identify what it actually would mean to be a more equitable city. What would it mean to have a policy that says we want more equitable, we want more investments in tree canopy in underserved communities? What do we mean by that? And part of the direction from the City Council and Planning Commission was to try to use this updated comp plan to integrate data that gives us a better picture of what that actually looks like in practice across the city, so we can be more effective in our policies. And then if we can operationalize this and have the data in place about our existing conditions, we can track performance over time and sort of look at whether or not we are actually being effective in changing these circumstances across the city. So we want to know, is our plan actually working? Are investments working the way that they're supposed to, and are we seeing a change over time? So the next couple of slides are really just a way of kind of highlighting some of the things we look at. So there was a lot of data and a lot of analysis that went into this comp plan update, looking at all these different factors from the equity lens, developing the best data and mapping that we had to look at kind of across different neighborhood councils and neighborhoods across the city, where the discrepancies were and where the inequities were on a number of these different factors. And I'll just kind of throw one out that's come up recently, is access to childcare. So through the comp plan update, we were able to look at sort of the current literature on demand for childcare services in the city, identify that the demand was not being met by supply for childcare services. And if you look at different neighborhoods across the city, there were discrepancies in terms of where the supply of childcare facilities were located, and neighborhoods that were particularly hurt by not having access to local and neighborhood childcare services. Now we're going through a process of code updates to look at how we as a city regulate childcare facilities. So from a land use perspective, we can look at, is our zoning and our regulations actually playing a role in creating these discrepancies around the city or preventing access to a service that is vitally important for our families and communities? The other part I mentioned is trying to have a plan that is more measurable and more trackable over time. So we want to have a better idea of whether or not our planning is actually successful. So each of the chapters, what you'll see as you go through it, is a greater focus on some of the particular measurables and outcomes, and some specific actions that we can take to help support that. So we were trying to shift some of our planning so it's not just more general language, but to really be specific about what things we can do today, over the next 2 years, 6 years, as a city to try to affect these outcomes and these trajectories. And then I mentioned earlier transportation. This was one of the chapters that you may have heard the Transportation Master Plan. It's now called the Transportation and Mobility Plan. It's one of the chapters of our comprehensive plan. This is one of the chapters that went through some of the most significant change and update during this round of work. So this plan includes updated chapters or elements that respond to pedestrian, bicycle, transit, freight, and auto modes. So if you are really interested in what does the bicycle network look like for the next 25 years? What is the outcome that we're trying to plan for as a city? This is the chapter to go to see what does that map look like? What are the facility types that we are planning across the city? And then what are the projects and investments that we need to make to actually implement it? So this is really the long-term strategy in the next 25 years. What should that bicycle facility build-out look like? What is the level of transit service that we want as a community? Part of the reason for this update is so when we are working with our partners, Sound Transit, Pure Transit, we have a better idea of what we actually want for our community and the level of service that we are looking for our neighborhoods and our residents. So we can then go to Pure Transit and say, this is what we're looking for. How can we help you get there? How can you help us achieve this vision for the city of Tacoma? In the past, if we don't have that kind of element, then those transit providers, when they do have money, when they do have funds to build or construct, and they ask the city, well, what is your vision for bus service or bus rapid transit or light rail? We're at a disadvantage if we can't say what our vision is and where we want that service. It also puts us at a disadvantage because we are trying to plan for population growth alongside transit. If we don't know where we want that transit located in the city of Tacoma, it makes it much more difficult to plan for a future where people are able to get around and meet their needs on a bus or a train. And then, again, kind of in the spirit of some of the updates here, the Transportation Mobility Plan incorporates performance measures for each of the goal areas and specific strategies and actions for each element of the plan. And then one of the keys here is a multimodal level of service, which is a very probably bureaucratic way of talking about kinds of commitments that we want to make to our community, what kind of level of service we want to provide to our communities. That could be, how frequent will the bus service be? What's our vision for that frequency for serving 6th Ave or Pack Ave or 19th Street? What kinds of facilities do we want to plan for? So that you know not just what is there today, but what is the city's actual plan for what my neighborhood will be in 10 years or 15 years, and not just what is it today. So these are really important chapters to go to understand kind of what that community, what your neighborhood might actually look like, how it might function in the coming decades. Not in the near term, but in that 10 or 20 years. And then the last thing I'll mention here, and then I'll kind of shift over a little bit to some of the work that's upcoming, is just a little bit about the way we conducted the work for this comprehensive plan update. There's really two different kinds of comp plan updates. There are limited amendments, and there's what's called periodic review. These are terms from the state, and so they sound wonky, that's why. But a periodic update is something we do every 10 years. It's a big deal. We can change our comp plan every year, and we do have periodic opportunities for community members or neighborhood councils to apply for changes to the comprehensive plan or our land use codes. So this was really a major update. The next one that will be a really significant update will be 2027, 2029. We're now required to do a mid-cycle, so not just a 10-year major review of our comp plan, but now a 5-year check-in. Make sure that things are progressing the way that they're supposed to, working the way that they are supposed to. But going into this update, we realized there's a lot of other planning work that happens at the city of Tacoma. Our Office of Strategy is updating the city's strategic plan. They were leading a community safety plan. Parks Tacoma has been out updating their strategic plan. We were working with our budget office, who was out talking about the 25 to 26 biennial budget. Our Office of Strategy was helping lead a participatory budgeting exercise across the city. Our Environmental Services Department was out asking people about how we could better protect watershed health. We realized that we were all very much asking, going to the same communities, asking a lot of the same questions. And there was really a focus here that in our engagement, to do coordinated engagement, that focused less on what document we were trying to update. So not focusing as much on the comp plan or the watershed protection plan or the biennial budget, but really to try to have a common set of outreach strategies, communication methods, and questions that we're asking the community. That then everybody in the city who was doing work developing these plans and strategies could use. So this has been something that was really unique to this process, was to try to do this level of coordinated engagement. This is one reason why I think in some of the feedback we got, you probably didn't hear as much about the comp plan update as much as the sort of broader focus on community engagement, branding as well. And so this was an effort that went out really starting a couple of years ago and going out through the summer in, what year is it? 2025 still? Good day, it's almost 26. So 24. Actually, no, I'm going to get all mixed up because we get done with the comp plan, now we're on to the next work already. So just earlier this year, adopted this over the summer. So really starting in early 24 through mid-25 for this engagement, including using the citywide survey, which is a statistically valid survey to help inform the comp plan update. There was a strong focus on outreach and engagement with South Tacoma, particularly really early on, and coordinating that work with our neighborhood planning program, and then launching a series of workshops throughout this process to get input that could then be used for all of these coordinated engagement efforts. Now, the last few slides, I promise, and I'll be done to answer questions. This is a slide I used to talk a little bit about how the plan gets implemented. And this is just one way of thinking about plan implementation. This is one I'm more familiar with, but there's lots of other different versions of this. It's important to know that the comp plan is policy. It's not going to necessarily require you build a house the number of trees that you have to plant. The policy sets the goal for 30% tree canopy by 2030. The code that lives in Tacoma Municipal Code, the development standards, are what tell you how many trees you have to plant when you go to build in the city of Tacoma. So the plan and policies gives them the legal basis for the things that we require in the code. And that's really important. So if something is not actually addressed in our plan, it makes it a lot more likely that we could get challenged on the legalities of requiring something in our code that is not connected back to the planning. So again, this is sort of just one example of where something like the 30% tree canopy and the city's goals and policies around expanding our urban forests come into play when we start to have a conversation about specific development standards and regulations for specific properties in the city. It's also really important to know that these first two steps are the two that have the most opportunity for public involvement. So when we're doing the broad planning work and then code development, there are always going to be opportunities for public involvement for your voice to be heard through that process. And in fact, as planners, we really believe that our plans and our codes are going to be better the more people actually review it, think about it, comment on it. You know, we are not subject matter experts who just know absolutely everything about everything. It is really, planning is really a socially deliberative process. So all of your involvement, all of your review of the work that we do helps us have a better product at the end of the day. Helps us think through contingencies. Once you get to permit applications and permit, issuance and construction, much less opportunity for community members to really affect what happens at that phase of the work. So really critical, message number one, for people to be involved earlier in the steps of progression here. I also wanted to call this to your attention because we just completed the comp plan. So step one, we went through that update. Step two now, when we think about what's coming up in the next few years, it's going to be much stronger focus on the code development side. And I think that was illustrated really well tonight with the discussion around the urban forest and the tree codes as an example of a situation where we are taking that next step now from the update on the goals and policies to now the update in the hard work of developing codes and development standards. So there's a lot on our plate. And the reality is almost everything in this sort of 2-year work plan is based on state planning requirements. So as I mentioned earlier, the state is getting much more specific about year in and year out adopting new things that we have to do at the local level. So we have a few big kind of planning exercises that we're going through currently that will be hopefully done in the next year. 5-lot suburban plan should be done by the end of this year through council adoption. We're still working on the picture pack out suburban plan. We expect that to be back the city council by second quarter of next year for consideration. We're going to be doing our 6-year transportation improvement program, capital facilities program over the next year. So those are some of the planning exercises that we'll be doing. But the focus here for the next 2 years is on the bottom half of code development. We have a mandatory update to our critical areas code we're currently working on. So the critical areas are things like fish and wildlife habitat, streams, wetlands, steep slopes, flood hazard areas. So these are the standards to guide what you can do when you are building or developing adjacent to one of these areas. The other is a requirement now to reevaluate some of our parking code. The state is telling us that there are specific kinds of uses or development that we have to exempt from parking. So the shift is happening now to start considering removal of minimum parking requirements more broadly. The landscaping and tree code update is something that Councilmember Walker talked about earlier, which was a council action to say, following the comp plan update, this is going to be one of the city's high priority implementation actions, is updating that code. We also have from the state basically guidance that local zoning has become an impediment to child care facilities, to meeting special needs housing, and we have to reconsider our zoning and land use approach to how we regulate those things so we can actually achieve more special needs housing and child care facilities in the city of Tacoma. Not just Tacoma, but here in particular. And then We will likely be kind of continuing to monitor what's happening with housing development after Home's coma, likely considering some adjustments to the zoning and land use there based on kind of what we're seeing with that development. And then we are seeing some additional state requirements to update things like our binding site plans, which is really in the weeds on how you subdivide property on large commercial projects, and things like ensuring that our local codes support things like passive housing. So you can kind of imagine a circumstance, if you can, where someone wants to have their house be like a passive house standard, which means it's such good insulation and orientation that you don't really need to heat your house in order to maintain the ambient temperature. So you want to go in, you want to put insulation on the outside of your house, but your wall is already your side yard setback. Can you put the insulation on if the insulation is now intruding into the side yard setback? So these are some of the kinds of circumstances that are so small, but also that people actually run into where the height of the structure, they can't add additional insulation or solar panels because the height of the structure will now exceed the height of the zoning that they are located in. So there's an emphasis here on kind of scrubbing our codes to make sure that there are allowances so we don't run into those kinds of circumstances where we're telling someone no because they want to do something that's going to be good for the environment. And then just kind of mention these here at the end, potential projects that we're working on. These are some of the larger kind of projects that we heard coming out of the comp plan update that we heard a lot of interest in. And some of the reasons why these are likely priority projects, but these are also going to be projects that are significant enough that likely are going to be contingent on resourcing and staff, both staff and consultant resourcing in the next few years. So these are things that are sort of, I call on the wish list. We know our downtown suburban plans are old enough now that they're likely kind of becoming stale, no longer internally consistent or consistent with state policy. There's a lot of focus in the comp plan on addressing some of the land use compatibility around the industrial center in South Tacoma. And then our commercial zoning across the city has not been updated for several decades. And this is an area, again, where our zoning is no longer sort of matching the policy direction that the city council has given us. So these are areas that likely in the next few years we would have interest in advancing this work, but these are contingent really on the availability of resources to support it. So I know I've probably gone over time, so thank you for bearing with me, but happy to answer any questions. I'll see one over here and then come back.
Yes, the Clean Water Act requires the city of Tacoma to adhere to a permit, which I don't see any actions up here. That permit has recently, the state has updated conditions for that permit, which require that trees and urban environment be used as a vehicle for dealing with stormwater runoff. I didn't see anything up here about dealing with that issue in your planning process. I'm curious as to why not.
Yeah, so the focus of that permit is being managed by our Environmental Services Department. And they are in the process of developing a stormwater comprehensive plan and an urban waters protection plan, or urban watershed protection plan. And so part of the focus of their work, though, is that a lot of those permit requirements now requires a more thoughtful connection between how we are managing stormwater and our water quality goals and how that connects back to our land uses. So I didn't mention it, it wasn't necessarily the point of kind of highlighting the presentation tonight. That is a focus of our Environment and Watershed Health chapter. That is where we establish goals and policies for clean water in the city.
So you're not involved in that process?
More peripherally. So they do consult with us kind of on the development of that, and we've partnered with them.
So my concern is that every week, every month, we pay a stormwater fee to the city through the utility that winds up funding the great infrastructure that guides our stormwater into drains and down pipes to plants. all of which are very expensive. And a very small percentage of that money could be used to solve the street problems we talked about earlier tonight. But it seems to me that that ought to be part of the One Tacoma planning process. I mean,
It sounds like that would have been a good comment too. That's something we can certainly relay to Councilor Walker. I think that question, because there are examples already in the city where we've determined that maintaining open space is part of our stormwater program. And so our environmental services department does own and maintain something like 400 acres of open space throughout the city. And part of the reason for that is because from a stormwater management standpoint, we can legitimately use some of those ratepayer funds to help support the maintenance and management. So happy to relay that suggestion to the
cities
team.
like Tacoma or like Portland, where homeowners who add to their property or develop new homes have to have a plan to retain the stormwater on the property, opposed to adding impervious surface that causes it to further move directions that we would prefer.
We'll move on to the next issue.
I'm sorry. I'm surprised that those two planning processes aren't connected, but it sounds like they're indirect.
Yeah, they are. They're just not. So the projects here that I've got listed are the ones that are more directly just under our purview of the long-range planning team at the city of Tacoma. So yeah, there is a lot of other things on the list that are being managed more directly by other departments. And then I know there's a few other hands up, so we'll go here and then over here.
Just to that, when you scrub your code, you're supposed to be removing any obstacles to low impact development. That's supposed to be part of your annual code scrub. That should help address that. The other thing, when I reviewed the One Tacoma plan, it was very frustrating. All of the chapters, except for the public facilities chapter, have strategies and priority actions. But the public facilities chapter, like the critical urban services of stormwater and the other utilities, there's no priority actions. It was impossible to see what the city is planning to do to actually provide the necessary urban services for this huge growth in population. There's no impact fees charged by the city of Tacoma, which is unique. No other city around us would pass on impact fees. We give away to developers, and all we're getting is high-end housing. We're not filling the missing middle. We're not providing affordable housing. We're just doing market rate housing. And developers' bottom line seems to get all the policy attention. I would like to see our planning be citywide, that the Environmental Services Department has to do planning. Their planning has to be in step with the planning that the planning department is doing. I don't see that right now.
That's great feedback. I appreciate that. Ideally, that's what the kind of work and the plan should add up to, right? Is that we are all working in concert, towards the same goals. So I think if you're not seeing that in the plan, that's good feedback to us. We've still got some work to do on that. So I appreciate that you actually went and took a look at the chapters and kind of reviewed it with that lens in mind. So if you're not seeing that, that's something we need to go back to and think about how we can do a better job of that prioritization.
One more question.
A little bit on this. We've been building a lot of buildings, talking about parking, and we'll relax it more. That's the words that you said. Right now, according to Cushman Building and your plan, half of the driveway per apartment. So we're having all this terrible amount of cars parked on the street everywhere on North Tacoma. That's happening elsewhere. How can we get more lax on parking? Whether it's underneath the buildings or some way to get some of these cars off the street. It's dangerous for the kids. It's hard for us to shop. And there's just no place to park.
I guess what I'd say is, look, that's not going to be a very popular conversation to have about relaxing standards. I know, depending on where you live in the city and kind of where you shop and where you recreate, that sense of kind of how much who are impacted by parking supply and demand be pretty significant. And but I think what we wanted to daylight tonight is that that is not where the shift is happening. So the shift is effectively happening at the state level without requiring parking, is effectively adding more cost to housing. And removing restrictions or removing requirements for the state to mandate how much parking you have to provide doesn't mean there won't be parking. It just means it will not be a uniform city requirement that dictates how much parking someone has to provide. So again, I wanted to daylight this tonight because I know there's probably going to be some strong feelings about how we regulate parking as a city, just in the regulations, but then what kinds of programs we have to support mitigating those impacts. Whether it's parking permit fees or shared parking or on-street parking, e-parking. Yeah, that'll be likely part of that conversation is what are some of the other approaches that we can take to look at how we manage the impact of that demand. But again, the state is moving the other direction from.
Not only our part of the city on the north end, but as you drive through the city where they've got these two buildings now, cars everywhere. It's dangerous for the kids.
Let's try and get a couple more questions.
Sure. You know, I'm curious from a planner's perspective, why do you think the state is being more prescriptive about what your job is, what you should be doing? Because I can't put myself in your shoes, so I want to get your perspective.
Yeah.
Why is that happening?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think to some degree, I think in large part, you know, if you just look at what the housing trends are, you can see a pretty clear picture that the demand of people moving to the state far outstrip the number of new units that are being constructed to the point now where it's effectively being treated as a state emergency. And so that's probably the largest thing that we're seeing is the state stepping in on housing. We've always had the state sort of stepping in on how we manage and regulate critical areas like wetlands. In this case, it's becoming much more pronounced on housing in particular. The other thing that we're really starting to see is a much stronger focus on climate and making decisions about climate resilience and greenhouse gas reduction. Those things also tie into the parking conversations, to the transportation conversations. So they're all pretty connected. So I think to some degree, the sense of emergency is such that this is a trend that we're seeing not just in Washington, but really across the country. You see this happening in California and other states, where the states are taking more steps to prescribe how local jurisdictions accommodate housing in their jurisdictions.
Let's make the last question this lady.
I'm just looking at the housing and here, what they've done with some big buildings. It just seems like they built buildings that are too big for thinking about all the other aspects. So they have no green spaces. They remove all the trees and all the shrubs. And that's not looking at environmental considerations, wanting to keep some trees and some shrubs. When you just remove it all, the buildings come right up to the sidewalk. The buildings are too large for neighborhoods. So I understand that the builders want to build buildings absolutely big as possible to make the most profit. But that does nothing to help the other aspects when you have to consider the environment, parking, heat and trees. Everything else seems like it's thrown out the window. That's the way it looks to those of us that live here.
Yeah, that's great feedback as well. So under current zoning across the city, you're not required to do kind of everything on one individual site. So we have zoning that allows kind of full zero lot line development, build out construction. We have other areas of the city that do require open space and yards on site. This is, I think, an example where, I mean, scale is a challenge in how we regulate scale across the city. That is one of the things that is really different across the different zoning districts. How big can you build and where can you build? I would say I think it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach across the zoning districts, but this is something that I think Home in Tacoma was trying to address, which is in the past, our growth strategy was simply to not allow significant housing growth in the majority of the city's neighborhoods because they were single-family detached dwelling residential areas. which meant having to only have a very few smaller areas where you had to locate all the housing, which means it has to be much bigger in scale to accommodate the growth we're projecting. So home in Tacoma does allow a lot more leeway for the smaller housing types that can still provide yard space, can still provide trees and other amenities on the site, while still boosting the number of units and the different types of housing that we can accommodate in the city. So I do think that we'll start to see some diversity of the kinds of housing that we're seeing. But again, we're about 6 months into to go to implementation phase. Now I see the last question in the back.
Talking about all this, I recall for last Friday day that of the projected number of people does not the downtown and the existing mixed-use center capacity to accept all of that population. I remember that statement, and so I'm wondering, where in the comprehensive plan does it talk about us addressing downtown? All the infrastructure's there for everything we want, for public transit, utilities, you name it. And that's where you can build up. But it doesn't seem like we have a strategy or a plan to make that happen. Is there some place where I can read that in the comprehensive?
Yeah, so generally that's addressed in our growth strategy chapter, and still around 35% of the forecast housing units are planned just in downtown. This, because of home Tacoma, some realignment how we would expect growth to occur across the city. So generally, kind of back of the envelope here, I believe it's about a third just to downtown, a third to our mixed-use centers, and a third of that growth to other neighborhoods across the city. So downtown is still expected to be a significant focus, but when we're talking about growth and development in downtown, it's also some of the most complicated and costly construction to undertake and develop and maximize that zoning and land. So that is one of the factors here, again, with home in Tacoma is you're generally talking about housing types that are cheaper, easier, less complicated to build, and likely therefore more affordable than when you're focusing growth only in the areas that are most complicated and expensive to construct. So that's a challenge there again in how we think about that. But that is the chapter I pointed to, and there is a realignment in that allocation.
So I'm sorry to finish it off, but we've actually run over, which we don't normally do. So can we have a big round of applause for Steve? A couple of the takeaways I had was that you have goals that are measurable, so we'll be inviting you back to hear how you're achieving those goals. And I'm going to just say the next meeting is December the 1st, and we have actually another full meeting. We've got as John Hines already talked about, we've got the Cushman-Adams substation update. We've got the Tacoma Schools will be coming to talk about their two bond issues that they have on the ballot. And Tom will be giving us an update on the tough Tacoma's Urban Forest project. So we look forward to seeing you all, and thank you very much for staying here. Great turnout. Thank you.